the Derek Diamond Experience.
Welcome to another episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast. I'm your host, Derek Diamond, and if you haven't yet, be sure to check out last week's episode where I discussed The Mandalorian Season 3 and the state of Star Wars in general with my good friends Jason Robbins and Wally Phelps. That episode is available on all podcasting platforms as well as YouTube, which you can find at linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast for all your Derek Diamond Experience content if you want to subscribe to the show through audio or the YouTube channel, or if you want to follow me on social media, everything is at linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast. For this week, we're going to continue the Star Wars discussion because, May 4th is come to be a fun day with Star Wars fans ever since the May the 4th be with you tagline started, which I can't remember exactly when that started. But I wanted to do one last big top 5 before the show goes on a summer break at the end of the month. And I was thinking, what bigger top 5 could I do than top 5 Star Wars moments? You hear a lot of top 5 Star Wars movies or top characters, but there are a lot of cool moments in Star Wars. And honestly, there's way too many to name. I even had to narrow down my honorable mentions list to 4, so as not to take up so much time, because we got a lot of listener lists as well that we have to get into. But I couldn't do this episode by myself, and I asked 2 friends of mine named Regan Bell and Christian Jones. They once hosted a show called the Fantastic People Podcast, and I was one of their first guests back in, I believe, early 2020. So we've stayed in touch periodically since then, and I had them on an episode of Feature Presentation to do a top 5 list, but they've never been on the Derek Diamond Experience before. And I thought with them going to Star Wars Celebration in London, it would have been perfect to have them come on to talk about that, which they do, and then we get into our top 5 list, and we have some general Star Wars discussion as well, as far as the toxic fandom, and really it's about a lot of that. So really fun episode. Thank you to everyone for submitting your list, and thank you, of course, to Regan and Christian for taking the time. So without further ado, here is our top 5 Star Wars moments with myself, Regan, and Christian. Well, if you didn't get enough Star Wars discussion from last week's podcast, you're going to get even more this week, because it not only is it more Star Wars discussion, but is the return of the top 5 list. And this top 5 list is so big, I couldn't do it by myself. I had to have some help, because I narrowed down my honorable mentions to 4, 5 minutes before we started this podcast. So tough top 5 to do. We're doing top 5 Star Wars moments. And joining me for this wonderful discussion, you know them from the Fantastic People podcast. We have Mr. Regan Bell. Regan, how are you, sir?
Good. May the 4th be with you.
Absolutely. We are recording this on May 4th, so I think it was fitting that this was the day for this podcast to work out. But also joining us, also from the Fantastic People podcast, Mr. Christian Jones. How are you, my friend?
Hello, I'm doing good, sir. Happy to be here. Happy to talk Star Wars.
Absolutely. Before we get into the top 5 lists, you guys were both at Star Wars Celebration in London. It seemed like it happened yesterday. So, Regan, let's start with you. How was the experience of being at Star Wars Celebration?
It was amazing. It was amazing. It was better than I think I expected. Just a little background. I guess it's been about 2 years now. I've completely turned my Twitter into Star Wars. I only follow Star Wars accounts, basically only really talk about interactive Star Wars. And so I've made some connections in that last year and a half, made some online friends, if you will. And last year in Anaheim, a bunch of them went. And so I got this like serious FOMO watching them do it. And so I was like, I gotta go. And so to actually be there with thousands of fans, and meet these people, meet a lot of friends in person for the first time, was just there's no experience like it, honestly.
Christian, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, similar things. My Twitter page is not solely devoted to Star Wars. But you know, Derek, I'm sure you understand this as a person who's been obsessed with pop culture for as long as I can remember, and being at the tip of the spear when it comes to the like cultural zeitgeist when movie news comes out. Like, I had the opportunity to sit in the room during the Lucasfilm panel and get to see the exclusive trailers and hear the announcements and be there when they announced Daisy and everyone went nuts, and sit there in Ahsoka and see the special trailer there and get to see Thrawn for the first time. Like, it was such a surreal experience as a person who's been obsessed with movie news and who's obsessed with Star Wars to like just be there in the moment, not just reading it on Twitter, but actually like living it then. So incredible.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. Just to live that experience where it feels exclusive, it feels special. That energy, the energy in every single room was just nothing but roars. And so it was yeah, to see those exclusive things, to get a little taste before it comes out, was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I was living vicariously through both of your Twitter accounts during Star Wars Celebration, because I got to go when they were in Orlando when everything with The Last Jedi came out.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I understand what you guys mean when you talk about that energy when you're in the room, when you're seeing the Lucasfilm panel and you're with thousands of fellow fans. Like, Star Wars fans, I mean, a lot of them have a bad rap, and in some cases rightfully so, but at our core we're all Star Wars fans, and being around people in costumes that have traveled from all over the world to be there for this moment, and just being around that raw emotion, there's nothing quite like it. It's I liken it to a movie premiere of a movie that you've really been looking forward to.
Yeah,
but that's the closest thing that I can compare it to, but it's really its own animal, if you will.
Well, and to your point, Derek, yes, is there toxicity within Star Wars fandom? Sure, there is in every fandom. But I had one experience where I had one person complain to me about Bo being the focus in Mando season 3 being wokeism. There was like 40,000 people there, and I ran into the one person. Every other interaction was extremely positive. Everyone was extremely well spoken, just excited and happy to celebrate Star Wars.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't want to make this a whole like bash toxic Star Wars fans thing, but we all have our opinions, but when people complain about things like that, I just say this is all one big story. Like, obviously there's going to be more Mandalorian. So let's see what happens with the next season. And then we can go from there. It's an ever evolving story.
I think there are corners of the Star Wars universe for all of us. And there's all something out there we love. And listen, if you're an original trilogy purist and you hate the sequel trilogy, whatever, there are critiques for it. The original trilogy still exists. You can still watch it. You can still love it and cherish it. And so we just have to find our corner, and be okay living there.
Well,
I don't love everything, but I like a lot of it.
And I think that's what's so great. A lot of that toxicity, comes from, oh, that's not my Star Wars. That's not my version of it. And it's like, no, it's not. It's somebody else's, and it's for somebody else. And you have yours, I have mine. We all love it together. There's aspects of it that we all love. But I think one of the greatest things, at risk of being called a Disney shill, I think one of the
you've been called that enough.
Yeah, I've already gotten that, which I'm sure we'll get there. But I think that one of the greatest things to come out of Disney era is just that, is that they're really making an effort to expand not only the saga, the world, the galaxy, but the offering for who is Star Wars for. Who can enjoy it. It's not just 40-year-old white dudes who grew up with the original trilogy. It's literally anybody, and to feel that inclusion, and to go to a place like London and be with 40,000 other people who don't look and act and think and talk like me, and don't like the same things that I do, but yeah, we can all collectively come together and love Star Wars. That is beautiful, and that deserves its place.
No, I totally agree with that. And the thing too is that, you know, to use a Star Wars analogy, like the galaxy is so big in Star Wars. Like you don't focus on just this one little corner of it. Like I like that they're expanding it and making something for everybody. Like if there's something I don't like, then I'm not going to watch it. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, I think to this point too, Reagan said, Disney's doing a good job of this. I think the last 8 months prove this. Andor is a great show. I loved Andor. Do I think Andor is what Star Wars should be all the time? No, I can't watch Andor with my child. That feels hard for me to accept when we're talking about Star Wars. But then we have Tales of the Jedi, Bad Batch. He's really gotten into Mandalorian. I know, Derek, it might not apply to you, but this Youngling show on Disney Plus is actually really good.
Yeah,
really.
It's surprising like how entertaining it is for me, and maybe it's just because I am a Disney shill like Reagan, but like I think we've gone on probably the best 8 months of Star Wars content probably ever. And it's such a wide variety, appealing to so many different people for so many different reasons.
Yeah,
absolutely. Last thing before we get to our list, Regan, you kind of teased it, but you shared something on Twitter that got a little out of hand. So
out of hand,
tell me about that.
Yeah, no, so 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi, and somebody else posted a GIF on Twitter, just saying, "Hey, I just saw this in theaters for the first time on the big screen," which was cool. But the GIF, I don't know why they chose this one. All right, I really don't. It doesn't make any sense. But it's literally, this is a still image from it. But it's Luke just wailing on Darth Vader in anger. He says, "Oh, I'll turn your sister to the dark side," or whatever. And so he's like, whatever. He's afraid, and he's angry about that. And so he said he wasn't going to fight him, and then here he is, just letting him have it. I mean, the dude's down on the ground. He's defenseless. He's just slamming the saber. Of course, then he cuts off his hand. He doesn't kill him. And as many others were sure to remind me, moments later, he throws his lightsaber down and he says, "No, I'll never turn to the dark side. I won't fight you." Okay. But so I saw this, and just this sheer emotion. I mean, look at that face that this guy has. I'm like, I hearkened back to the argument of The Last Jedi, when people are like, "Oh, that's not my Luke. That's not Luke. He would never, turn his lightsaber on toward his nephew and whatever." And I was like, tell me again how this guy isn't that guy. It's that emotion, right? I was just calling to the emotion. That was it. Just saying it's consistent. It's consistent with who he is deep down, that Skywalker rage, that Skywalker blood. And it may not be the story you like, it may not be the direction you like, but it is the same. It's consistent, right? With that original writing and what Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi. At least that was my reaction when I saw it. And so I said that, and 730,000 people later, and I think now we're up to like 700, 800 comments, quote tweets, retweets, and 7,000 likes. A lot of people
one
had
large therapy bill from all the negative.
a lot of people had something to say about that, which I did not. I mean, I should have expected, but man, people get real protective about their holy boy Luke. So
it's insane to me that now, years later, that movie still gets such a strong reaction, whether it's defense or knocking it. People have to admit it gets a very strong reaction.
Yeah. And somebody actually, I think, maybe it was, no, who was it? Somebody said this. It might have been, I was thinking it was Steve, but maybe not Steve Wise. But they called out. They were like, imagine, 6 years later and it's still getting this kind of conversation, then that means it's good writing. Like if we're still talking about it 6 years later, otherwise we could have just all moved on and forgotten about it, but we haven't, because it still makes us think, and it challenges us, and it makes us have emotional reaction to it. I mean, some people are very emotional to this and I get it. You grow up with this guy being your penultimate hero, right? The hero's journey, and the savior of the Jedi and the way and the beacon of hope and light and all that is good and goodness and pure goodness, right? I get that, and I respect that, and so I can understand how a slightly different version of that can be off-putting or jarring, especially when it's been 30 years of stories with Luke and the Jedi. So I get that, and I'm not trying to upheaval that or challenge that version or view of who Luke is. All I was trying to do is just say, hey, it's consistent with, it's actually consistent, right? It's different than you thought. It's different than what you're used to, but it is still narratively good storytelling, right? And consistent with character. So anyway,
I don't want to, belay our top 5 list here, but I do want to make one point here that I saw a lot, Regan, when reading through your comments, was that people are like, oh, the moment is over. He's learned his lesson when he throws the saber, and then it's backtracking for him to go back to that moment. And I totally disagree with this argument, because Luke in this scene in Return of the Jedi starts in fear and goes to anger. He never makes it to anger in that scene with Kylo Ren. Now, if you're interpreting the Kylo version of the scene, maybe, but what we're supposed to believe to be the real version, he's simply motivated by fear. And because of his experience with the dark side, because of this event, he knows, I know what comes next. And he's able to stop himself from that. So it actually is character evolution. He doesn't go to the anger that he went to previously. He recognizes the path he's on. He stops himself. And then he deals with guilt and pain and regret and understand. We don't really see that in this moment here. He throws his blade and he's like, oh, I want, essentially once his dad's saved, we don't see him addressing the effect of his kind of brief turn to the dark side. We actually do see it in The Last Jedi. So I of course I think it's consistent, but I also think the argument that it's backtracking doesn't actually acknowledge what's happening in that scene and how it relates back to this moment in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna make a Twitter. It's totally unrelated to this post. Actually, I was planning on doing this anyway after rewatching the sequel trilogy, and I'm gonna make a big thread and a whole analysis of the whole thing. But one thing that I found when watching this, because I too didn't like the Last Jedi. I was like everybody else when I first saw it, and I kind of started to stop liking TFA. I really liked Taras the first time I watched it. Christian can attest to it. I was like, yeah, that's the best thing ever.
It's the worst drive home in my life, Derek.
Yeah. And it was great. It did everything I wanted it to. But upon rewatch, I'm like, and years removed from my expectations of what I had for those movies, just watching them purely for what they are, because I haven't watched them in years, I was like, oh, wow, this is actually really good. However, the problem was our expectations, right?
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
reason I hated The Last Jedi is because I spent like a year and a half or 2 years watching YouTube fan theories, and I got fixated on what I thought that's it. That's the right thing. And then when it wasn't that, I was mad, frustrated, confused, like you just big old middle finger to the fans. And I was like, that's not right. And then same thing with Tross. There was a whole bunch of expectations, and a lot of those expectations come from this moment where after that, what do we get? We get 30 in the 90s and onward. We get 30 years of the expanded universe and a version of Luke that was written in time and history that's no longer canon, right? But we still, a lot of fans come to the table with that canon in their head, thinking that is who Luke is. And that's why they have such a strong reaction to it. But if you take those expectations, you lay them to the side and recognize it's the same Luke, but written from a different perspective and from a different point in time, it's actually a really rich story. It's really rich and compelling. And so I kind of flipped on Tross versus Last Jedi, where the other one kind of feels like a big old hot mess instead. So anyway.
That's putting it mildly. That
Yeah.
Rise of Skywalker's a hot mess.
We can relitigate the sequel trilogy another time. I'm always down for that conversation.
Sorry, I don't mean to take over.
Well, or reason to do another podcast.
There we go.
So, okay, so we're going to do a top 5 moments in Star Wars. So it's anything Star Wars related. It could be from the animated series, could be from the Disney Plus shows, movies. If it's Star Wars related, it's eligible to make the list. So we'll do honorable mentions first. I know, Christian, you said you had one. So what's your honorable mention?
It's appropriate because it's from Visions. Visions Part 2 came out today. This is from Visions Part 1. And I'm going with The Duel, the very first Vision sequence in Visions Part 1. It is kind of a lone wolfing cub, very Kurosawa inspired, really ties back to some of those original inspirations George had from Star Wars. But the reason why I say it's so influential is it is our first dose into global storytelling for Star Wars. It really brings a different and unique voice into Star Wars and what Star Wars can be, while also telling a pretty compelling Star Wars story in 12 or 13 minutes. I think Visions 2 steps it up a whole lot, but I didn't want to be too recent. But it is a really good example if someone says, why is diversity important? Well, watch what Star Wars can be when we get voices from all over the world chiming in and telling us. I can tell you that Duel episode was the only Visions cosplay I saw at Celebrations. Like, if there was a cosplay from Visions, it was from that one short. It's very influential. It's very, very good. And again, really harks back to kind of the OG thoughts and processes behind George's mind when writing Star Wars originally.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to watch Visions this weekend.
You got to, bro. It's so good.
Oh, wait, you haven't seen the first season?
Mm-mm.
Oh man, it's good. It's good. They're not all a hit. I'll say that. They don't all hit, but it depends on your taste, your style, and what you like. But I appreciate the effort that was made and the diversity and all of it. And season 2, which we now have, but we had a sampling of at Celebration. I was like, holy cow, this is just kicking it up 3 or 4 notches. So
love it. Regan, any honorable mentions from you?
Oh, right. Honorable mentions. I've got 2 quick ones. One, so this one almost made the top of my list, or made my list. But the Andor, in Andor, the monologue from what's his name? The
Stellan Skarsgård.
Yeah, Stellan Skarsgård. Like, holy cow! Right when he's like, "What did I sacrifice? Everything." You're just like, oh man, that is the rebellion. That is Star Wars. Like, that is life. So that was just a huge, that moment hit so hard for me. And I tweeted out the other day too, like, what moment lives rent free in your brain from Star Wars? And that is one. It's now become one of my favorite quotes. But when I took a step back and I was like, all right, everything else in Star Wars though, like what's ultimate top 5? It got pushed out. So you'll see in a second why. But the other one across all of Star Wars, it's actually not from content itself, but Celebration a few years ago, I wasn't there, but I saw it online for announcements around the Rise of Skywalker, when Ian McDiarmid came out and said, "Roll it again," and then they roll the trailer, and it's just like that's when it was revealed that he was there and was going to be in the movie. That's just, he's the villain of Star Wars. How can you not love anything with that guy in it? So
somehow he returned.
Somehow, I don't know. Yeah.
But that moment though that you're talking about, I remember watching the live stream.
Yeah.
And that I would have loved to have been there, because that place went nuts.
Absolutely nuts. Yeah.
It was insane. So I've got 4 I'll go through really quickly. From the Phantom Menace, and I don't want to get into full discussions of the flaws in every movies, but Phantom Menace does have some cool moments. The pod racing sequence, I remember seeing it for the first time in theaters. I was 12 or 13 when Phantom Menace came out in theaters, and specifically the moment when Sebulba is like right behind Anakin, you hear that do 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 do, and it just gets louder and louder and louder. Was so cool to me. Like 12, 13-year-old me was geeking out over that. A more recent one from the Book of Boba Fett, when Grogu reunites with Din Djarin. I don't have kids, but since I've married my wife, I've gotten pretty close to our niece and nephews. So I can only imagine like the parents watch, like you guys watching that had to have been really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was surprised in the listener submissions, no one had anything from Kenobi, But I have one from Kenobi, and this would have been probably number 6 on my list. The duel between Vader and Obi-Wan after Obi-Wan splits his mask in half, when Anakin says the line, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did." And you see the light go from blue to red, and you see the eye turn yellow. That whole sequence and the mixture between Hayden Christensen's voice and James Earl Jones's voice was perfect. I've gone back and I've watched that scene in particular numerous times.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because a lot of Kenobi should actually end up on my honorable mentions list. I loved Kenobi. I really loved that
I did
show.
too.
And I almost put that one on like my top 5 list. And then also, now that you mention it, the 2 conversations with Obi-Wan and little Leia, when she's like, "Did you know my mother?" Or did you, and he starts talking about her, and it's just like, oh my gosh, the tears. And then at the end, like the very final scene, when he expresses like, "You've got this from your father and this from your father and this from your mother," and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what are they doing? The
girl who played Leia was fantastic, by the way. She was so good.
She was fantastic at Celebration too.
Yeah.
She dealt really well with that attention and with
That's
the
awesome.
audience, and just still being a kid. So that was all of
I will follow up with that scene, Derek, in that I love that scene in that moment, and I almost put it in my list, and I almost put it in the scene that it harks back to, which is in Rebel Season 2 with Darth Vader and Ahsoka.
Yep.
Us Rebel stands, we winning right now.
Yeah.
Everything
Big
is
time.
for us. If we stuck it out all 4 seasons, they just making content for us right now. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a Rebels rewatch before Ahsoka comes out.
I'll do it with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it, and we'll tweet about it. I'm in the middle of it, sort of. I'm on season 2. I think I'm about to finish season 2, but it's been super slow the last few months. I meant to do it in like a couple of months or weeks or months, and it's been like 6 months. But
let's make that happen. We'll talk offline and get that worked out. Real quick, my last honorable mention is the Battle of Hoth. Seeing that for the first, I think it's one of the best battle scenes of any movie ever made.
Yeah, I mean, so good it gets a reference in Captain America: Civil War, right?
Mm-hmm.
The tactics are great, the special effects are great, and I mean, I don't think we're spoiled, I think, probably with movies today, but when you think about like how intimidating an AT-AT is, or how it would be to an audience back then, I mean, and how it is to a kid for the very first time, it's an incredible fight scene.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So, Christian, we'll start with you. Do you want to go through your top 5?
Sure, bro. I'm an appropriate place to start because my number 5 comes from The Last Jedi. I actually wanted to do the scene that Reagan's talking about because I didn't realize there would be this much discourse about it, and I was like, "Oh, that's got to be it." But I went with my favorite, which is the throne room scene in The Last Jedi. One, it is in my opinion the most beautiful shot in all of Star Wars. The staging is exceptional. The way it's choreographed, I realize people have complaints about the sword fight. It works on film. It was incredibly beautiful to watch. But listen, I don't know if this is appropriate for this podcast or not, but that's the closest thing to a sex scene we're ever going to get in Star Wars. Those two are making love while they are stabbing their lightsabers through Praetorian guards. And I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm a big #Reylo person. I think Rey and Kylo are the opposites of Anakin and Padme. I thought that from Force Awakens. And so that really culminated in that scene to me. It's just so much of what I wanted out of the story, on top of being just expertly crafted and expertly directed.
Yeah.
Totally.
The moment when she throws the lightsaber and he catches it. And, I mean, that's beautiful.
And that huge wide shot with all the red, and you see the guards. Like there's no complaints about that scene at all to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she grabs his thigh, bro, while stabbing somebody. Like, it's hot.
It is.
I did not. I mean, I should have known better knowing you. I didn't expect that to be where we went, but I mean, it makes sense. It's cool.
I respect it though.
Yep.
So what's your number 4?
Oh, we're going straight through.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So number 4 is Ahsoka escaping Order 66 in the final season of the Clone Wars. One, I just think it's obviously a question people have had. How did Ahsoka do it? I am a sucker for, maybe I watched Die Hard at too formative of an age. I'm a sucker for like one person's got to get through a building of bad guys stories. I we interacted on Twitter the other day. I love The Raid. It is the inspiration for a lot of things for me. I love, just the concept of being outnumbered and the idea of like levels in a story. Like you have to get from floor to floor to floor. And that is that kind of story. But this is also enhanced by Tales of the Jedi, which came out in October, November, with that one clip with Anakin training her how to fight the clones, and showing that Anakin was preparing her for the future, even when he didn't realize it. I just think it makes the relationship so beautiful. I don't know if they had that bit written when they wrote the episode for the Clone Wars season 7. I doubt it, because it's probably 5 years in between there, but it's a great callback. They just strengthen each other. And Ahsoka, you can't see my shirt, but Ahsoka is my favorite character, and seeing her overcome those obstacles in that kind of environment, big fan of that.
Yeah.
Number 3, I'm gonna go something real recent. So spoilers if you haven't finished the last season of Mandalorian. But the destruction of the Darksaber. Regan and I have had this conversation already. Listen, I think props to Dave Filoni, who basically inserted this thing into Star Wars and got to tell its entire story. He brought it into the medium in Clone Wars. We reference it in several episodes of Rebels, and of course it becomes a big plot point through the first 3 seasons of Mandalorian. And I appreciate that Dave got to tell the whole story of it, beginning, middle, and end. On top of that, I think people get obsessed with the big flashy laser swords in Star Wars and fail to see what they represent. And the Darksaber represents destruction. It is the destruction of Mandalore. It is constant fighting, constant war. They could not create a new Mandalore with the same way the old one was destroyed. And so I think the destruction of the Darksaber, from a symbol perspective, needed to be a symbol that was removed from Mandalorian society, essentially. And I appreciate that they had the cojones to actually do it, much to Reagan's dismay.
That's fair. I just like the Darksaber.
I know you do.
It looked so cool in live action too.
Yeah,
It
Like
did.
much better than I expected. It reminded me, did you guys ever play the Force Unleashed video game?
Yes.
Yeah.
There you can get a black bladed lightsaber,
Mhm.
and that's what it reminded me of. And I'm like, that looks so
Look.
cool. But I get the reasoning why they destroyed it though.
Yes, I understand all of that. The thing is, I just like the Darksaber, and I get that it's the destruction of Mandalore, whatever. Okay, but I like that it's this whole like whoever holds. It's like it's like a game of whoever holds the stick is in charge. Like it's like the passing of the scepter, if you will, and just sort of that representation.
Well, I mean, it's like Excalibur, right? Like
Right,
the person who
right.
pulls the sword from the lake gets
Whoever
to
holds
rule
rule
Camelot,
there,
right?
you know,
But
whoever's
you know,
worthy.
Arthur was killed by his best friend, so like it doesn't mean it's inherently good, just because you get to rule. So yeah, that's number 3. Number 2, the most famous line in all of Star Wars, "I am your father." Empire Strikes Back is number 1, reigns supreme for me. And this line takes Star Wars from being just like sci-fi fantasy and turns it into a multi-generational opera. It is, up until this point, it's not really a familial story, but once we have the connection between Luke and Vader, and Luke and Anakin, now we have a multi-generational story. How did Luke's dad go from hero in the Clone Wars in the last, what we hear about in the last movie, to being the most evil guy in the galaxy? And again, his son is supposedly the chosen one. We don't know it yet, but obviously his daughter Leia is just this ultimate hero, chooses good all the time. How can they come from this guy? It's this line that makes that story happen. And it's just, at a time it was a twist, huge twist, shocked the world. I think Darth Vader translates as Dark Father in German. So should it have been that shocking? Probably not. But still, cinematic history made with those few words. And my number 1, You said Phantom Menace, and I wanted to say this then. My number one comes from the Phantom Menace, which is the Duel of Fates. One, soundtrack, phenomenal.
Yep.
Best John Williams
Yep.
piece of music ever written. It is incredible. Obviously, the fight that is just unbelievable to watch. I watch it way more than I'd like to admit. Everyone is at the top of their game. The effects still hold up 24 years later. But this moment is the moment that decides Anakin's fate. It is this moment that sets the story for us. And I get it. It's a movie. It's written. It was always going to happen this way. I understand, but this is the way that it happened. And when it's not that the dark side has to win, it's that Qui-Gon has to lose. That Qui-Gon probably is the only Jedi that Sidious feared, and is the only one that could have affected Anakin's growing up, could have prevented Sidious's kind of infection in his mind. And as long as Qui-Gon loses, that is what sets Anakin on the path forward to him becoming Darth Vader. It is the moment that decides the entire saga. And besides its importance, it's to a beautiful soundtrack, and it looks incredibly beautiful. So yeah, Duel of Fates, right up there, number one for me.
I love it. No, I remember, again, seeing that for the first time in theaters, the first time that Darth Maul activates the dual-bladed lightsaber. My little mind was like, what?
Yeah. World went nuts, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a game changer. But no, I agree with every single thing you said. Like, it's to me, the best lightsaber duel in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree.
Regan, your top 5, sir.
So I'm gonna do this a little bit different. I don't have them like in 5 order. They're in no particular order, but I wanted to try to grab something from every era of Star Wars. And so I want to do it sort of in a flow like that, ending with the but they're all in the top 5 together. So anyway, first thing comes from the games, Knights of the Old Republic. When spoilers if you haven't played it. I can do this without spoilers. When you find out who Darth Revan is, as a preteen teen playing that game, that just rocked me. I was like, oh my, what? Like, it really caught me. To me, that is the "no, I am your father" moment of the games, where it's just like, oh, everything gets flipped on its head. And it really, to me, cemented that story as one of the greatest Star Wars stories that we have, because of really the way that was written, the sort of not seeing it, and then how it kind of foreshadows throughout, and then just because even I think, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I played, Darth Malak delivers that truth to Revan. And so it's very similar to the Vader delivering that news to Luke of, no, it's me. So anyway, that's I would say that's probably number 5 anyway at the bottom, but it comes from the games. So
like it.
Yeah.
I should have known that KOTOR would be on this list for you. I did not peg that, but I should have known.
Of course. And then the next one, I don't know that I'd say this is a number 4, but it's definitely not number 1. It's close though. Is Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order? That moment when she's talking with Anakin and he's like, "No, we're sorry, come back." Like, again, spoilers. And she's like, "I can't. I have to find my own path." And she, like, that, just watching that slow walk away and that still moment where she's standing in between the 2 statues and the sun setting at the temple. It's beautiful. Number 1. It's emotionally a wrecking ball. And every time I see that image, I immediately start just like water in my eyes, because it is their connection, their bond, their journey, watching Ahsoka grow up throughout the entirety of the show and really come into her own, and to see that betrayal from the Jedi Order that she experienced, and then to be asked to stick around, and she's like, I can't. Knowing how much she loves the Jedi, knowing how much she loves, what's right and true, is just, it's huge. I love that show, I love the character, and that's just a great moment. So
as much as I love, the extra episodes that come in season 6 that are really kind of nonsensical in a lot of ways. And as much as I love season 7, that is the natural ending to that show.
Yep. Yes.
That is a perfect like closure moment. And it is beautifully done.
Yeah.
I don't think it's undercut by the stuff they added. I mean, it was probably undercut by season 6. I think season 7 kind of redeems that ending a little bit, but that it's an incredible moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, as a natural ending too, it's like this whole time. I mean, the whole time you're watching the show, you're like, okay, but like, why don't
Where is she in Revenge of the Sith?
Why don't they talk about her in Revenge of the Sith? You know, they're like, that's weird. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's why we don't talk about her. And then we kind of get it's a false ending at this point, and then we do get season 7, and then we see another big, oh, that's why she's not there. And oh, cool, they did interact, and that's really well done. But to your point, Christian, yeah, I think it's a phenomenal closure and ending on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as someone who was late to the party on Clone Wars, I knew what was going to happen when the moment came, but it still hit me like I had just watched it for the first time. Like, that's how well done it was. And anybody, like, if you're still listening to this podcast and you've never watched it, still go out of your way to watch it because it is that good.
Yep. Absolutely. Even though I know what's happening every time I watch it, it's a gut punch. So
yep.
So next is from the sequel trilogy / new era. And I really had to think about this one. Okay. I really had, because as I thought through, I'm like, man, there's so many good moments in Star Wars, period. Okay. This was very hard to do. But when I'm thinking about the sequels, I'm like, wow, there's actually a lot of really good moments, despite its flaws. Like, there's some good stuff. So from the throne room scene, fight is done. And Kylo's trying to say, come with me. And she's like, oh no, I got to go find my parents, whatever. Right. And basically when he says, you're a nobody, your parents sold you, they're junk traders. They sold you for drinking money. Right. Just and I know what Christian's thinking. He's like, what? You hated that. But going back and watching it, the energy drain out of Rey's face, watching him use that to manipulate her, number one, and try to stir up those emotions to convert her to the dark side. But really what's lying underneath there is pure Star Wars. It's pure, right? If you think about, go back to A New Hope, right? Now I grew up with the whole trilogy out, but go back to A New Hope. Luke was just a dude. He was just a moisture farmer on a desert planet who just wanted to go to Tosche Station and get some power converters. All right. Like, he's a nobody. He's a nobody. And I think that's why we all connected with him, right? Because we feel like nobodies. And there's just this, goofy little, moisture farmer and nephew of a moisture farmer, really, who goes off into this galactic journey, and he has his hero's journey experience, right? The hope of that journey, that is pure Star Wars. And then when you say, Rey, you're a nobody, it's like, now her heroine's journey can begin. Now she can cast off the shackles of whatever she's supposed to come from, and she can actually have her journey, and we can get a pure Star Wars story out of her. Now, whatever, it's not what we end up getting. And I loved that at the time, but that just, for me, in terms of sequel trilogy moments, that's number one. That is Chef Kiss, pure Star Wars.
I have lots of thoughts.
I know you do.
Same.
But I'm gonna keep it simple and just say 1,000% agree on your comparison to Luke Skywalker. One of the things that I love about Star Wars is that it is for everybody. And especially it is for kids. And everyone, my friend Jason Hurt, who I do Real Phonies with, Jason always talks about how, when you're 5, you're Luke Skywalker. Like, when you're 5, that's who you are. Now, when you're an adult, are you more like Mon Mothma's husband? Maybe. But when you're 5, you get to be Luke. And when you make it a generational story, and while I like that, you do kind of take that element away. And for Star Wars to kind of come back to it and say, okay, it can still be a generational story, because we got old Ben Solo here. He's basically, Prince of Naboo and of
right.
Like it, we still get that, but now our hero is a nobody, and she is just like you. You get to be the hero in a galaxy far, far away. Besides, I think it's way more interesting story point. But I do think when it speaks to the people who are watching Star Wars, which for me is a big filter that I look through when I critique Star Wars, is how do other people watch this? It's an incredible choice.
Yeah. Well, and to play off what you're saying there, because I wanted to mention this too, again, pre Empire Strikes Back, there wasn't this generational story, right? Like it wasn't everyone had to be somebody and come from somebody's bloodline to be powerful and to be the hero, to have to win, to conquer the giant and whatever, right? And so now with this 30, 40 plus years of Star Wars, that's how we view Star Wars, is this generational bloodline, Skywalker legacy. And it's like, but originally that's really not what Star Wars was. And even from in the original trilogy at the time, that's not really what it was. And so to be penultimate Star Wars, we have to kind of strip that away. And that's what that moment did. So
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with both of you.
Yeah. So next is from the prequel trilogy, and I'm gonna actually cheat. I should have thrown this as a honorable mention, but that moment when Vader is laying there on the table, Anakin is fully Vader, and it's quiet, and you hear the for the first time, right? And it's just like it all comes together, right? It is all now one story. It is one seamless story. We get from little boy Annie to Darth Vader, and he's the guy. He's the most powerful evil guy in the galaxy. And then when he's rising up, and it's just like boom, it's Darth Vader. Now we get right after that the no, that's goofy, all right, but right up until that point, even when I watched it again today just to double check, even when the Emperor at this point, Darth Sidious, says, when he's like, where's Padme, and he's like, you killed her. And he's like, whoa, just the dread and the realization. That's that final, people on Twitter talked about this moment being the final moment that turns Luke to officially new level Jedi. He's officially a Jedi. That moment to me of Darth Vader realizing that he killed his wife, the one he was trying to save, and is that anger, that just hurt and pain, that is what cements him into the dark side. That is what it says to him, I got nothing to lose now. And so Galaxy, goodbye.
Look out.
Yeah.
Yeah, had they left that scene with him crushing all the medical equipment and everything, and seeing Sidious have that evil grin on his face, that would have been a great way to end it. But Uncle George had to give us one last little nugget before we go to another scene.
He loves the camp. I mean, George loves campy, so I don't like it either, but I understand that's who he is.
Well, and I think it's actually consistent with it's a re-edit that he makes later in Return of the Jedi. Doesn't when he picks up the Emperor, doesn't he say no, and he like throws him over the edge or whatever? Like that wasn't originally in the movie. That's goofy, and it gets added later. So I think it's it's consistent at this point with that, but yeah, cool.
Good or bad, it's still consistent.
It's still Star Wars. So the last moment comes from the original trilogy, and that is the other honorable mention I wanted to throw out real quick from Revenge of the Sith. I went back and forth on this, so I'm picking two. It was the Obi-Annie fight when he's already sliced him, and he's like, you were my brother Anakin, I loved you, you were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. That is just like that emotion between those two and Obi-Wan, and just you can see on his face he's kind of giving into emotion at that point. Like he's just totally distraught. And again, that's what throws him over the edge. That's where he gets sliced and falls into the lava. That's how he becomes Vader in the first place. The version of Vader that we see in the first place. That was a just very big moment. That's one of my favorites and it gave us tons of memes, So the last one then is from the original trilogy, Return of the Jedi. when and truly right after this moment, like we led off with, right? This is where Luke becomes officially a Jedi. This is that sort of hero to aspire to, right? I think what we love about Luke and past versions of Luke that we've gotten in media and in fiction is that I'm not perfect, but here's this version of a character that is, despite being threatened by the Emperor and the darkest Sith there is, and despite the rebels getting destroyed and being alone here, I'm not going to strike you down, right? Like the self-control to be able to, first of all, lose control and then realize the error of your way and throw away your weapon and say, no, never. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to, kill me if you want. I'm not going to do it. Is very powerful, very inspiring. And again, I would say, and so I understand a lot of people's critique on what happens later in the sequel trilogy, is that this is quintessential Star Wars and what we should be attaining and living up to. And this is the hero who's conquered the challenge and now said, reached a new level. This is who I am, not that. I'm not going to become you, and I'm going to take the high road, and I'm not doing this, right? So that moment where he throws that away, never, I'll never turn to the dark side. That is probably top 1 or 2 in Star Wars.
Well, and I think also when he specifically says, I'm a Jedi like my father before me.
Yep.
It really, it hits you right here, because it's like, no, he's not Darth Vader to me anymore. He is my father. He is Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty
Totally agree.
powerful to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to point out that people who love that Luke throws his saber here hates that he throws his saber in Last Jedi, which is just ironic. That's all.
Funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because like the first couple of replies to my tweet, somebody referenced, and then he throws his lightsaber. That they were talking about in this scene.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, what I wanted to read into it was, then he throws his lightsaber. That's not my Luke. And I just like, after a minute, I went, oops, that's not what he was talking about. And then, of course, everybody else decided to remind me. But
everyone who commented on it, that's what I wanted to respond. Well, you hated when he threw his saber in Last Jedi, so like you don't get that defense no more, bro.
Nope.
That's funny.
All right, Derek, you man.
All right, so my number 5. Let me take you back to the premiere of the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. So I have a habit of like waking up early the day that Mandalorian comes out, and I watch it before work because I want to avoid spoilers, and I have no patience when it comes to Star Wars.
You're very good about that.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting on my couch, and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, is asleep in our room. And, watching the climax and everything, and then I see this X-Wing pull into the dock, and I just kind of turn my head like, Luke Skywalker drives an X-Wing. And then I see the cloak, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And then when he turns the green lightsaber on, I literally go, and I'm just frozen watching what happens. Like, it was to me a great reflection of the Vader scene at the end of Rogue One, with everything from, the triumphant music, and just watching especially the look on Moff Gideon's face, that ultimate like, I'm dead moment. Because if you think about it from his perspective, he goes into a room with Vader and the Emperor, and they don't walk out, but he does. So every villain in the galaxy should fear this guy. And you can say what you will about, the deep fake technology and everything. I think it looked much better in Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
But that initial reaction, I couldn't believe what I saw. And it had to make my top 5. And it took me everything to not just scream as loud as I could.
Yeah. I'm a sucker for a good hallway fight scene.
Yeah.
Him just shredding those whatever they were, those droids or whatever. I'm all over that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and it's. I mean, listen, I loved Mandalorian season 3. It's probably it honestly is probably my favorite season of the show. So this is gonna sound like a weird complaint, but I almost wish the show had ended there. I think it's a beautiful ending for everybody. Din taking off his helmet to say bye to Grogu. Grogu going off and being a Jedi. Like, I think it's a killer moment for everyone. It's where season 3 is a standalone story, kind of beginning to end. 1 and 2 is one story, which is Din finds Grogu. Now he needs to get him to where he belongs, and it felt like a real culmination of that. And I think it's a fun moment for the nostalgia, and it's a beautiful moment between what else the other dynamics that play in that scene.
I agree. I would argue, yes, that's where Din and Grogu's story should have ended. But the Mandalorian should have gone on with Bo, just like we had. We didn't need Din to have Bo in this.
Listen,
No.
I totally agree with what you're saying, but I do also like the ending we get in season 3 too.
Oh yeah, that's great too.
Yeah.
Happy endings are welcome. We don't get enough of them in Star Wars. So I know there's going to be more. Season 4 is already written, blah, blah, blah. But I would be totally fine too if that was the ending of the show. Them just living on their farm and eating frogs. Like, sounds great.
Yeah.
Complete with the Looney Tunes, like zoom in
Yes.
and then
Loved it.
Yep. My number 4 is funny. You mentioned the scene where Vader throws the Emperor, down the Death Star shaft, because that is my number 4. Minus the inserted no, which is terrible. I got so mad when they did that. Seriously, like, people get mad at The Last Jedi. They should get mad at that, because that is completely irrelevant. Again, watching that for the first time and watching, Vader look at Luke, him begging, "Father, help me." And he looks over and Palpatine's just shocking him as hard as he can. And he just keeps turning his head back and forth. And credit to John Williams for his epic score throughout really all of Star Wars, but this too, like, the music just builds and builds, and then Vader picks him up. I can only imagine the theater on opening night had to just erupt when that happened. But it's one of my favorite moments from back when I first watched Star Wars, and it's still one of my favorites now.
Yeah, I mean, it's Anakin becomes the chosen one, right? Like, that's the moment he fulfills his destiny. But I do feel bad for Anakin a bit in this scene, mostly just because I think it's a culmination of all of Star Wars. But Freddie Prinze Jr. has this really good rant about how people don't dictate things, the Force dictates things, and that, like, the reason why the Emperor is so powerful and the Force is the dark side's clouded, the Jedi, is because the Force wills it to be that way. And poor Anakin's right at the center of that, man. Wherever the Force wants to go, Anakin's little good, and then move to the bad, back to the good, back to the bad. Fine, okay, we're gonna end good. Like, it's where he's the odometer of the Force, so he just point us in the direction we need to go.
Absolutely. Number 3, another Vader moment, the end of Rogue One, when he slaughters all the rebels as they're trying to escape with the Death Star plans.
The good old hallway fight scene.
Yeah, I love a good hallway fight scene. I'm right there with you, my friend. Yeah. I remember, again, seeing it for the first time, and you just hear the little rumble in the back of the room, and then the camera starts to push in, and you hear the breathing, and the red saber ignites, and you're like, holy crap, this is like something out of a horror movie. And that was the Vader that we were all wanting to see, just pure rage, and we got it. And I watched Rogue One today. I watched part of it this morning, and then the rest of it, when I got home to prep for the podcast. Still an incredible moment. That whole movie is excellent. You could make the argument that that's the best Disney Star Wars movie that's been done, in my opinion.
Yes, I did make that argument a few years ago. That moment almost made my list as well. I will just say this. I know, from what I understand at Celebration, Tony Gilroy really doesn't want any more Star Wars. He didn't really want it to begin with, it seems, and certainly was not keen on the idea of doing a TV show, because that's just not his thing. But man, give that guy more Star Wars. Like, he just gets it and gives us some really, really powerful moments like that. So,
number 2 is Duel of the Fates. Again, best lightsaber fight I think that's ever been done in Star Wars. Specifically, after Darth Maul kills Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's waiting on the other side of the barrier, and you can see the rage building up in his face. And as soon as that barrier is gone, he just goes full rage after Maul, and they're just moving so fast. That's the best part of that fight scene, in my opinion. It's just there's so many emotions, from John Williams' score to Darth Maul looking angry all the time, which Ray Park does a great job of. It's just an incredible fight scene.
You guys ever wonder how much Peter Serafinowicz made, how much money he made just doing like 3 lines for Darth Maul in that movie? Like, that guy, he's getting royalty checks now just for, he's like 2 lines in that movie. Darth Maul's so fun.
I love Darth Maul. Number 1 is the destruction of the Death Star.
Which one?
The first one, from A New Hope. So everything, again, from John Williams' score to the anticipation of hearing Obi-Wan's voice saying, "Use the Force." Luke turns off his targeting computer. Han shows up. That whole sequence is my favorite in Star Wars, and it always will be.
I think you bring up a really good point here talking about this moment, Derek, because I think people can forget how influential this movie was in 1977 and how influential it still is today, because it's really easy for us to look at it in 2023 rose-colored glasses and critique, it's puppets, it's 1970 CGI, all this stuff, or CGI equivalent or whatever, like effects. That's 2023 glasses right there. I used a word that didn't even exist back then,
but good old George created.
Absolutely. So it's easy for us to do that, and this is a great reminder of that, because I truly, honestly believe one day Tom Cruise was watching Star Wars and went, "What if we did this but with F-18s?" Because it's the entire premise of Top Gun Maverick is just to do the trench run on the Death Star. It looks identical. The movements are the same. I mean,
planning session.
Yep. He literally was like, "They could do this, but in Super Hornets," and it's still affecting movies 50 years later. Like, that may not be true, but in my headcanon, it's 1,000% true.
Yeah, I would buy it.
Yeah.
I'd buy it as reality.
Yeah. I can't deny the similarity.
It's great also to go back and watch the making of the original Star Wars and just seeing all the models they built, from the ships to the actual physical Death Star trench that they used. It's all just so fascinating, because people still don't realize they invented a lot of that technology because they had to. In order to carry out that vision, they saw that, well, this isn't possible. Well, they made it possible.
Yeah, that's why I said earlier, I mean, there's so much about Star Wars that it's like, man, how can you only pick 5? Because even some of the moments that you're like, well, that's kind of cheesy, or that's not that great. Because of what they had to do to create that moment back in 1977, or with the subsequent films, the impact that had, even some of the most minute details, smallest moments on cinema from then on. I mean, movies we watch today are technology that was created, is being used today, that was created for those movies back then, that didn't exist, and pioneered so many things. I mean, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch Light and Magic, I think is what it's called, the docu-series on Disney Plus about ILM. That they go really deep into it, and I did not realize that, not only did George create Pixar, which I knew, but Adobe Photoshop, not him, but people who are working on Star Wars today and working on it back in the prequels, they created the technology to use for those movies, and then it developed into Adobe Photoshop and got sold off, at that point. And it's like, without that movie, we wouldn't have the whole career, a whole industry of artists and photographers wouldn't be doing what they're doing because of Star Wars. Like, that's incredible. And you're right. The trench run, the destruction of the first Death Star is a great representation of the skills and the manpower and the innovation that went into those movies to kick it all off. So
Absolutely. Well, you guys want to get into the listener lists?
Let's do it.
All right, so first up we have Brandon Rutledge. His honorable mentions in mostly chronological order. The pod race scene from Phantom Menace. The chaotic opening scene from Revenge of the Sith with the giant space battle and R2-D2 with his fancy oil slick was pretty awesome. In Revenge of the Sith, when Palpatine kills Mace Windu, he specifically mentions the quote, "I am the Senate."
Mm-hmm.
Obi-Wan versus Anakin from Revenge of the Sith. Who shot first, Han or Greedo from A New Hope.
Time.
Luke fighting Darth Vader in a cave in Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, yeah.
The revelation of Luke and Leia being siblings. Finn using a lightsaber to fight Kylo Ren. And Regan, as you mentioned, the Darth Revan revelation from Knights of the Old Republic.
Nice.
Let's see. The following three were the last ones to be cut from his top 5. See, that this was a really hard list to do.
Mm-hmm.
Obi-Wan using the Jedi mind trick on a death stick dealer from Attack of the Clones.
Great moment. Love it.
You don't want to sell me death sticks.
Yeah.
Actually seeing the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs from Solo, our first Solo reference.
Yeah,
It's the only
props
good
to
thing
that.
that came out of Solo, but
Hey, get out of here. Solo's a fine movie.
It's really not that
forgot.
bad of a movie going back and watching it.
I totally forgot to even include it in my list. Like, I have not seen it since that first time we saw it in theaters. I keep forgetting it's a thing.
I watched it again not too long ago. It's not as bad as you might remember. Because I remember going to the theater and I'm like, I was okay.
Yeah,
But it's really not bad.
I'll give it a shot.
And then the fight scene on Jabba's sail barge from Return of the Jedi. And then his number 5, Boba Fett being shown to be alive, which was a cool revelation that we've all been wanting to see on screen. Along with Luke Skywalker's cameo, his 5 was a tie. Number 4, Yoda versus Count Dooku from Attack of the Clones. Number 3, the Death Star battle from A New Hope. Number 2, Duel of the Fates. And number 1, No, I Am Your Father from Empire Strikes Back.
Some carryover there with some of ours. I saw Reagan make a face. The Yoda fight scene. Listen, it's not my favorite moment,
All right.
but I want to say this about it. Everyone shows those videos about Avengers Endgame when all the Avengers show up and Cap says Avengers Assemble and the crowd goes nuts. That moment for me, the equivalent is when Yoda lights up his lightsaber. I mean, people were standing, yelling, clapping.
Yeah.
They went ballistic.
It was great.
Yep.
It was great at the time. And as a
Theater
kid,
environment.
I loved
the theater environment. Perfect.
Totally
And,
agree.
The homage with Grogu, hopping around. They're just throwing the puppet. They're just throwing it.
I said this on the show last week, but that puppet has more than made its money. Like, however much it costs to make, it has made astronomically more than that for Lucasfilm.
The only reason that kid is in that show anymore is to just sell more toys. Like, that's it. He's just a merch.
Who cares?
People love
It's
him.
great. Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just making sure we acknowledge that. That's really why the story still talks about.
That's
Grogu.
at the heart of so much of Star Wars, bro, is to sell toys.
Jason Robbins, my co-host from the Nerd Cave Retro Show. As far as honorable mentions, there are just too many to name. Luke showing up in Mandalorian, to Grogu jumping into Mando's arms after being reunited, to the quote, "I can't swim." There's just too many.
God.
Yeah.
All
So
of Andor.
good. So good. Number 5, when Lando pilots the Falcon out of the second Death Star and barely makes it out before being swallowed up by flames and screams, "Yeah!" That moment still gives me goosebumps every time. Number 4, Duel of the Fates. He says, in a movie full of flaws, that is one of the greatest moments in cinema. When the laser door finally opens and Kenobi lunges at Maul with absolute fury is breathtaking. Number 3, Vader ignites his saber in the dark hallway in Rogue One. 2, Han makes the right decision to become a hero and literally saves Luke in the rebellion and says, "You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home." And number 1, Luke confronts Vader for the first time on Bespin, and out of the shadows, Vader says, "The Force is strong with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet." The way James Earl Jones delivers that line just sends chills down my spine.
Bespin underrated Star Wars location.
Yes.
That room
Clouds-
specifically.
Yep. Everything about Cloud City, I'm super on board with. And yeah, that whole Empire rules.
Yeah.
That's
That
all.
is such a good movie.
Yeah.
I will say the best. Sorry to derail for a second. The best post George Lucas, or no, sorry, the best post release George Lucas fixes, right, is Cloud City. I think just the
Agreed.
additions he made with the backdrops and the
Mhm.
the wider angles and the activity in the windows, it highly improved that whole segment.
Absolutely. Steve Wise, number 5, Luke comes to the rescue from The Mandalorian. Number 4, Vader attacks the rebels from Rogue One. Number 3, Luke and Vader's lightsaber battle from Return of the Jedi. Like, we haven't talked about the main battle specifically, but like to that point, that was the best lightsaber duel that we got.
Mhm.
Number 2, Duel of the Fates from The Phantom Menace. And number 1, I Am Your Father from The Empire Strikes Back.
You know what it says to me, Derek, is that we are really in tune with the general audience of Star Wars here. Like,
I think the three of us have proven that
yeah,
this evening.
we got that.
Yep.
Minus the Last Jedi talk, but other than that, the Disney
Well,
shilling.
Thomas Carter Rochester, in no particular order. The Vader hallway scene from Rogue One. Luke to the rescue from The Mandalorian. Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi saying, I am a Jedi, like my father before me. I mentioned that earlier. Very good quote. Anakin versus Obi-Wan from Revenge of the Sith. And from the Return of the Jedi theatrical cut, green dancing Twi'lek boob. Hashtag never forget.
Yeah. I saw that one on Facebook, I think. Yeah, or something. Yeah, that's funny.
That made me laugh out loud when I read that the first time. Nick Smith, number 5, the quote, "Who's scruffy looking?" Underrated quote, in my opinion. Number 4, Luke's final run on the Death Star. 3, the Duel of the Fates. 2, Leia telling Han she loves him. He knows.
Classic moment.
And number 1, the Emperor having so much fun being evil in Return of the Jedi. He's so happy.
Yeah. He actually there's a point when he's walking down during the fight, I think, and he's just like clapping. He's walking down the steps and just
Use your aggressive feelings, boy.
Yeah. And then I will say too, real quick, the I love you, I know. We have throw pillows for our bed that say that. So that's a good.
That's
a good
awesome. If you want a funny parody of that, watch the Family Guy version of Empire Strikes Back.
I've not. I need to see that.
Those Family Guy versions they hold up pretty well.
Oh, they're
actually
great.
Pretty good.
Just
yeah.
don't watch it with the children.
No.
What Regan didn't say there was that was for our bed, his and mine.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
He's got the Leia tattoo. I'm gonna get a Han tattoo on my arm. So
Yeah.
not really.
And what else would he admit?
There's been a theme throughout here, which I don't know if people have picked up on, but anytime we talk about Star Wars normally, the other one is in the story with us. So it would be like driving home from Tross, driving home from Rogue One, going to Celebration.
Yeah.
From Wade Vatican, number 5, Luke saving everyone in The Mandalorian. 4, Vader destroys so many rebels in Rogue One. 3, Vader reveals himself to be Luke's father in Empire Strikes Back. Number 2, Han showing up to save Luke in A New Hope so he can destroy the Death Star. And number 1, Luke destroying the Death Star.
A lot of
All
Vader
good ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Jonathan McIntosh, number 5, it's a trap. The battle over Endor was amazing for its time, tripling the amount of effects on screen and a huge thrill to see again in theaters recently. Number 4, Fulcrum is revealed to be Ahsoka Tano on Star Wars Rebels. Ahsoka's return to the fight after walking away from the Jedi Order in the Clone Wars series.
Yeah.
Number 3, the Vader hallway scene at the end of Rogue One. This was the first time we saw Vader raw and unhinged, using not only the Force, but carving up Rebel scum left and right. It was terrifying. Number 2, it's effing Luke Skywalker, the Mandalorian Season 2 finale that sent Star Wars fandom into meltdown. And number 1, No, I Am Your Father. The biggest cliffhanger of the modern age of cinema, and it took 3 years of waiting to find out it was true. All of it.
Nice.
Yeah,
Wally-
that Ahsoka moment's killer. I am
Yeah.
no Jedi, and that's what I'm wearing right now. I am no Jedi. Ahsoka in Rebel Season 2 it might be my favorite bit of Star Wars media, period. I mean, I really, really love it.
That line when she's fighting Vader and he says, "Revenge is not the Jedi way," and she says, "I'm no Jedi." I'm like, uh-oh. Vader might have his hands full.
Yeah.
Great.
Wally Phelps, I can't. I just can't decide, so I will list an order it pops into my head. The last 30 minutes of Rogue One, which are incredible. I Love You, I Know. Star Tours. No one's mentioned Star Tours or any of the attractions, but I count it.
Yeah.
Duel of the Fates and I Can't Swim.
You know, that's a great point Wally brings up there. Rise of the Resistance is the greatest amusement park ride of all time. It is.
Oh, it was so good.
It's so good.
Yes.
And I'm glad no one told me what it was. And I still don't go into detail unless it's somebody who else has done it, because I'm like, you got to do it for yourself.
Yeah,
It's so
incredible.
It's breathtaking. I need Wally to clarify though, because isn't there multiple versions of Star Tours?
There's like 137 different variants of Star Tours.
So I need to know specifically which one he's talking about.
He's got to give us a date and a time.
Yeah,
and exactly what happened.
Yep.
Which room he was in, because the sequences change. I mean, there's all sorts of things with Star Tours.
That is a great thing about that ride.
Yeah.
Side note, I do love that they brought that into Rebels, I believe. There's a transport ship at one point. I think it's season 1. They're having to work with a governor or governess or something. And the little transport ship they get on is modeled after the Star Tours ride. And then the little droid in the driver's seat is that droid. And they do that a couple of different times. They've even done it in modern, I think, Disney era.
He was just in the last season of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you see him in live action too, which I think was really, really just fun little nugget. So.
From Donna Diamond, who's also my mother. I have not seen everything Star Wars, but I'd like to give my top Star Wars moment. I remember going to Pensacola's Westwood Mall in 1977 to see Star Wars, a movie everyone was talking about, with my mother, sister, and brother. We had no idea what we were going to see, but it was unbelievable. From the moment the first words scrolled across the screen, you were hooked, and the characters were amazing. There were many memorable moments, but the one I remember most is the Death Star being destroyed and the entire audience jumping out of their seats and cheering. I'll never forget it. If the DeLorean from Back to the Future was real, I would love to go see Star Wars in opening night. Like, with the knowledge I have now, just thinking these people have no idea that they're about to witness history.
Yeah. Yep. I've said that before too. If I could go back in time, every open, like all those moments, all the moments we've talked about, but especially OT moments, like to see it with an adult audience and see how they react. It'd be cool.
That would be incredible. And our last list from Grant Spencer, number 5, Anakin saying, "Now this is pod racing."
That's a very Grant answer.
Yeah,
I know Grant very well. That is a Grant answer.
Yeah, that's great.
Number 4, Count Dooku meeting Obi-Wan from episode 2. Han Solo saying "I know" in response to Princess Leia. 2, Ben Kenobi versus Maul. I wonder if he remembers if he's talking about the Rebels fight.
I think so.
It's the
right.
I wanted to include it so bad.
It's
such
great.
a great scene.
Yeah, it's so
There's a
good.
few people that when I tweeted out about it that mentioned that one too. Yeah.
And last but not least, Duel of the Fates. That's been on just about everyone's list, which is great. I mean, as it should be.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if Phantom Menace is better than everyone gives it credit for.
Oh, it totally is.
No, it is.
Again, yeah, I'm not your average fan, but no, I crapped on the Phantom Menace a lot about and it's true. The CGI doesn't hold up in a lot of spots, okay? Because it's early tech. Some it does, some it doesn't. The grass. If there was anything I could beg Disney to do, it's go back and give me a remastered version of the prequels and fix the grass in the big droid fight. because it's just a flat plane. Like it's video games 5 years later have better grass that's digital than the Phantom Menace.
It's enough grass talk, Regan. Go
Anyway.
on with your point.
So my point is that going back and watching the story though, it's actually really fun and it's really good, and it is meant for a whole new generation of children fans, but it holds up a lot better than people try to act like or remember that it does.
Listen, the Phantom Menace is like Nickelback. Everyone wants to hate it, but somebody's buying those records.
Look at this,
you know,
photograph.
you know what I mean? Like somebody's watching that movie, and I think it opens in the wrong foot because you're like trade wars. There's a blockade. Like this is for kids, but like they don't know what any of these words mean. Yeah, I never understand what they're saying. But listen. It is better. From the moment you get to Tatooine on, that movie's all gas, no brakes, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It takes you a little bit to get there, but once you're there, there's nothing wrong with that movie.
Yeah.
And it's got two of the coolest characters in all of Star Wars, Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul.
Dude,
Whoa,
so cool.
And Jar Jar Binks, man. I mean, who can't love that
Well,
guy?
he's a close third.
Yeah.
By the way, I
Listen.
was so happy that Ahmed Best came back for Mandalorian and was the one who saved Grogu.
Yeah, great choice. Great redemption there in Star Wars, and not for him, but for us, the fans.
Yeah.
Like it was an opportunity for us to make up for where we went wrong. And props, great decision.
And I will say this:
I want more of that.
at some point, I don't know when it's going to be, but I still think that Jar Jar will come back in some Star Wars story, and he'll be redeemed, and it will
I
go
think so.
over well, and the fans will love it.
You think it'll be
Hopefully.
live action? Or you think
Yes.
they'll cop out and do animation?
I think it'll be live action.
I think it should be live action.
yeah.
I want it to be.
I don't think it will do justice. I mean, I'm a sucker for Star Wars animation, but I don't think it would do the justice it needs by not doing it in live action. So,
Yeah. I think
agreed.
what's his name? Ming Chen? Is that right? Men Ching?
Ming Chen?
Ming Chen. The Lucasfilm guy.
Oh
I don't know
no,
what you're talking
Ming Chen's from Comic Book
Comic
Man.
Book Man.
No,
Yeah.
who's the guy? Yeah, oh yeah, you're right. Sorry, not him. The guy from Christian, we saw his panel at Celebration. He was
I have
talked
no
about-
idea.
oh my gosh, the Asian guy from Lucasfilm who worked heavily on the prequels, and now he's like a bigwig at Lucasfilm.
I didn't go with that with you. That
No,
was
Chelsea
you.
went to his first one, and then I thought we all went to his. Maybe you
I don't
didn't go.
think so.
Anyway,
This is bad podcasting.
Sorry.
So, somebody will
horrible.
correct us.
someone correct me. Anyway, I feel horrible for not knowing his name. I think he slipped, or maybe he didn't. People theorize that he did because he talked about bringing back Padme's ship for the Mandalorian, and how they went back and recreated it. Up until that point, though, there was this huge fan theory, which I still think is true, and I think he just calls it Padme's ship because that's what it looks like. But there's this theory of that it's Jar Jar Binks actually who flew Ahmed Best's character to rescue Grogu. It wasn't Padme because timeline wise, like she should be on Mustafar, right? With Obi-Wan and Anakin. And so what I really want to see, what I really want in live action, and it's got to be Mandalorian flashbacks, but is Ahmed Best's character, I can't remember it now,
Kelleron Beck.
Elrond Beck delivering Grogu, baby Grogu, to Jar Jar Binks and hiding him out with Jar Jar, and you see the two of them on screen together. A little moment, just a nod to the fans, but also like the full redemption of Jar Jar. I think that would just be. And this, I'm not going to quote the podcasters it came from who I heard it, but I just totally think it would be rad.
I think
that-
that's one likely. Two, the guy you're thinking of is Doug Chang.
Doug Chang, that's right.
If that happens, I'm going to record myself just standing up off my couch and going,
Yeah, because it is a Naboo ship, right? But that's why it's like it can't be Padme's. It's who else is from Naboo? Who else is a senator from Naboo? Right? It's
it ain't Palpatine.
right. Well, not at that point, right? So it's Jar Jar.
It has to be.
Yeah. Anyway,
That would be awesome. But guys, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
The only thing I got going on is Real Phonies. I chug away with that show with my friends Joseph and Jason. There's no real structure. There's nothing good about it. It's just three guys cracking jokes about movies the whole time. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I am at Dat Jedi Guy, DAT Jedi Guy. I was Fantastic Phony for years, but we don't do Fantastic People anymore, so didn't make sense.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and say Fantastic People, it is still live. It is still up. You still can go check out all the great episodes that we have. We do have a couple of Star Wars conversations, so you can go find those. And Derek, I might provide you the links for those. But other than that, it is forthcoming. It will happen by the end of this year. My wife and I will be doing a Star Wars themed podcast together. Name TBD. To be determined. But it's basically going to be about parenting and relating that to Star Wars and drawing lessons for parents and for parenting, things you can teach your kids and how you should teach your kids from lessons from Star Wars. So that will be coming by the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that. You can find out more about it by following me on Twitter at Jedi Sympathizer. And if you also just want to get nothing but great, wonderful Star Wars commentary and lots of retweets from Star Wars, you can follow me there and love to have you. So
fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to do this top 5. This was great.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, always down to talk the old galaxy far, far away.
Thank you once again to Regan and Christian for taking the time to have this awesome discussion and to list our top 5 Star Wars moments. I'm sure there'll be many more Star Wars-centered episodes of the show in the future, as always, and you can follow them both on Twitter. You can find the links to their pages in the show notes. I'm going to be doing another review this upcoming Thursday. I'm going to be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So if you've enjoyed my reviews, I'll be releasing another one this Thursday. Had a lot of fun watching that movie, and I've got a lot of stuff to say about it. So that'll be out this upcoming Thursday. And for next Monday, I'll be chatting with actress Amber Doig-Thorne, who starred in the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey horror. I don't know if you want to call it a parody or a retelling of the Winnie the Pooh story as a horror. And I remember kind of being taken aback when I heard that this was actually going to happen. But she has agreed to come on the show. We're going to talk about that and, of course, other aspects of her career. That episode will be out this upcoming Monday, 1 week from today, if you're listening to this the day it comes out. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to follow the show, whether it's through social media, you want to subscribe to the show, just head over to linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast to find all of your Derek Diamond Experience needs. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. I'm your host, Derek Diamond, and we'll see you guys back here Thursday for another awesome episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast.